Welcome back, everybody. This week we're going to talk about what is an existential crisis and, more importantly, what it has to do with Christmas. First, what is an existential crisis? It is when an individual's meaning or purpose is called into question. Why do I do the things I do? Why do I make the decisions that I make? Usually it's triggered by some kind of loss or new experience. And given the season, it also can be triggered by Christmas. Now, I don't want you thinking that Christmas is a specifically religious holiday, because it's not. I'm sorry if you think that, but it is definitely not a religious holiday. It's for anybody of any religion, from any background, of any ethnicity. Please celebrate Christmas. It's more about Western civilization than anything else. And it's about existential crises, and I think we all go through that, and no movie portrays this better than National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. The entire movie, in a sense, is an existential crisis. It is a man who wants to have a good old-fashioned family Christmas, right? So the entire movie, he's trying to hold on to this thing. He's trying to hold on to this idea of meaning, of how he has gathered meaning in the past, how he's gotten connection with people in the past. But there are really two parts of the movie when it happens, and that is when his parents visit and he finds out how absolutely annoying they are. But he can still push that out a little bit. But the real crisis comes when what? He gets the Jelly of the Month Club membership instead of his Christmas bonus. But I think this may indicate the importance of an existential crisis here, but we'll get to it. What are the three causes, though, of an existential crisis? Okay, so it's when your meaning and purpose are called into question, but really the cause of it is like what Clark W. Griswold goes through in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Well, time's kind of slipping away. Your kids are growing up, that this important Christmas event that you had when you were a child, that's going away, so you're trying to hold on to that, you're trying to grab onto that. Usually some kind of decision anxiety, which isn't really portrayed well in the movie, but if somebody's having an existential crisis, they're thinking, well, why am I doing what I'm doing now? Well, why did I choose this career? Did I just choose this career because my dad wanted me to do this career, or because I grew up in the Midwest and this is what we do when we grow up in the Midwest? Why do I have the partner that I have, the girlfriend, the boyfriend, the husband? What's going on there? Why did I choose them as opposed to somebody else? Why is my wife so much like my mother? That's kind of strange. That might cause on an existential crisis. And then in just anxiety in general. The idea of an existential crisis, it wasn't literally coined by existentialist philosophers, but that's where the idea comes from. So Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Nietzsche, examples of existentialist philosophers. It's not really a good demarcation of philosophy, because it's just any philosophy in the 19th century that said that existence exists. Which, hey, for 19th century philosophy, that was a radical notion. But it's usually a pretty poor demarcation of a philosophy if it encompasses both Heidegger and Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand is technically an existentialist philosopher, and fun fact, she originally didn't want to call her philosophy objectivism. She wanted to call it existentialism. She thought that was the better name, but it was already confused with all these people who she already disagreed with, like Kierkegaard and Heidegger. So it was developed by existentialist philosophers, so existentialists think that only existence exists, but part of the trap in that is thinking only existence exists. You don't exist as a part of existence. So the crisis was just being part of existence, and there's nothing you could do about it. So there's this general anxiety, according to Kierkegaard, let's say, of living in existence. And maybe Kierkegaard was around during a time where he didn't really realize that the anxiety may have to do something about him and what he was going through. And actually, the thing about Kierkegaard, one little backstory on him, is he was the prototypical rich kid philosopher, came from a very, as we would say now, privileged upbringing, and he didn't really have to do that much, which would indicate why he probably had a lot of anxiety, and compounded by the fact that he did grow up in such wealthy background. right? Well, I have all these great things. Why do I still feel anxious? Well, it's because you don't know how to properly engage with existence. And I think that is ultimately the cause of an existential crisis that people don't talk about. It doesn't really come from living in existence, but it comes from lacking an existence in existence. It comes from lacking, as we say here at Animus Empire, a well-developed personal boundary. And if you go back to Christmas Vacation, that's what Clark W. Griswold goes through the entire movie, developing an identity, getting more and more feedback, I guess you could say, from the environment, whether it's the annoying yuppie couple, it's Margot, right? Todd and Margot, whether it's dealing with his nagging parents, whether it's dealing with, wanting to get back this thing that he thinks he has lost. This is him developing a boundary, but then it all comes to a denouement when what? He gets the Jelly in the Month Club. Well, that's really the trigger that leads to the denouement, but it's what starts with the Jelly in the Month Club. And then he just can't hold off any longer, and he has a breakdown, and he communicates, or perhaps yells, but at least he's starting to communicate. He's developing a boundary. He's getting a better idea of what this Christmas vacation, of what this family vacation is going to look like. And that's really when the main crisis happens, but that's also when the resolution happens. And I think, so when we think of an existential crisis, we think, oh, that's bad, I don't want to have one. But really, as indicated by Christmas Vacation, it's having an existential crisis that's exactly what you need. The problem isn't that you have the crisis, it's that you see it as a crisis. I mean, let's go back to what we talked about in the beginning. I mean, a crisis comes from a loss or a new experience. Well, those are both great things when you know how to develop your psychology, you know how to manage it. So the crisis is that you see it as a crisis and not as a catharsis, not as an existential catharsis, or even cheesier, an existential Christmas. That's really what the point of this is. It's really just like an acceptance of what's going on in reality, and that's the development of the boundary that Clark goes through. That's the identity, and then from there he goes on and effectively, through the extension of his family, gets not only the Christmas bonus that he was hoping for, but plus what? It seems like a great trivia question. 10%, 15%, or 20%? Of course it's 20%. So it makes sense that an existential crisis will happen during Christmas, because Christmas is essentially a life, but a denser version, but a concentrated version of life. Lights, togetherness, family, goodwill among other people. And if you don't feel like you can live up to that, then you're much more likely to have a crisis. It's very similar to what I talked about in my article about why there are a lot of suicides on the Golden Gate Bridge. I think there's lots of reasons, but I think one of the reasons is that when you walk across the bridge, you have two very different pictures there in the tableau. There's the city, however great San Francisco looks from a distance. Up close, maybe not so great, but from a distance, it looks spectacular. It doesn't look like there's heroin needles all over the place or anything at all. And then so you have that great tableau, but then you have the churning abyss below. And if you look out at the city and you don't feel like you can live up to it, that in a sense is a loss, that is a new experience, and it causes a crisis. And when you don't have the wherewithal, the psychological wherewithal to deal with that, you're going to be much more likely to jump. Christmas, like the Golden Gate Bridge, they don't create the crisis, but it magnifies it. But that's what we work on here at Animus Empire, developing a boundary in particular, how to exactly develop a boundary on a decision-by-decision level, how your boundary relates with your emotions, what your emotions even are in the first place. And I know this sounds cheesy whenever I say it, but you're never going to get this information anywhere else. You definitely don't get it anywhere else right now, and the trajectory that the psychology industry is going, they're not going to stumble upon it anytime soon. You're only going to get this here. So if you have any questions there, I would recommend that you start with my book, AmusEmpire.com/ebooks. And that's it for this week, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me. Please like and subscribe. Enjoy your Christmas season, regardless of whatever religion you think you may be. And always remember that an existential crisis has very little to do with existence itself, and it has way more to do with whether you have the right to exist.